Hello, all my Umbraco pals out there. My name is John, and in this video, we're going to talk about how to become a badass content modeler using Umbraco V9. Now, in this video, I'm going to take an HTML template and I'm going to completely walk you through everything that you need to do in order to model that page within Umbraco. So we're going to look at all the code, all the layouts, all the page types, all the content modelings, dependency injection, all that sort of stuff. Now, in this video, I'm going to cover a lot. So all I'm going to do is quickly gloss over and give a high-level overview of everything you need to do. Now, if you're new to Umbraco, hopefully this should give you a good idea of all the steps that you need to follow and all the topics that you need to research in order to build a website. And if you're an Umbraco Pro, hopefully this should show you all the differences between V8 and V9 so you can get up and running with your next Umbraco project really easily. So if you're watching this at home and then I gloss over something or you don't really understand a topic, please leave a comment below, and then in a future video, so this is a series, I'm going to do the deep dives into the areas that people really want me to talk about. So leave a comment if you want me to do something. Now, this is a series on Umbraco, and if you want to be an absolute legend, I recommend that you smash that subscribe button. If you want to become an Umbraco ninja and be an absolute badass, hit subscribe, it's not going to cost you anything, and you can see the rest of this series. So assuming you've done that, we're going to start off this video looking at which HTML template we're going to be building within Umbraco. All the code and all the setup that you see in today's video is going to be the basis for my Umbraco 9 starter kit. Now, you can download this starter kit, it's free and open source. All you need to do is go to my GitHub. So my handle is John D Jones, so no H. As you can see, it's pinned from the start menu. So all you need to do is come over here and then just clone away. Now, the HTML that we'll be using for this website is from html5up.net. Now, someone showed me this website the other day, and I've got to admit, it is pretty good and impressive. So if you come over here, you'll see that they are about, 20, 30 different HTML templates that you can download free of charge and use to build the basis of your website. So the one that I'm going to be using today is called Strongly Typed. Now let's have a look at how it's made. So as you can see straight away, we've got a menu at the very top here. Now this is a mega nav, so it's not just a simple nav, so I have to model that. Next, we've got some content on our page. After this, we've got like a component area. So we've got a few components that we'll need to model. So we have this feature component. In the feature, we also have these 3 different items. So maybe we've got a way of doing a block list editor. We've got a banner component. We've also got a blog area. And as you can see, we need to pull in blogs from different areas within our website. So this means we're going to have to create a blog document type and then pull that data in on our homepage. Finally, if we go to the bottom of our template, you can see that we have this contact us form component. So this is actually in the footer. Now, I won't be hooking all the form up and doing all the postbacks in this video. I'll do surface controllers in another video. And then finally at the bottom, we have a footer. So this is pretty much everything we're going to model in today's video. Let's have a look at the code. Whenever I start a new content modeling process, I always start with the basics. So I look at a page and I need to think about what components are reusable and shared between many pages and which data is specific to that page. So as you can see on the example in front of us, we have our head. Now, most of the data in head is going to be shared between every page. However, in the head, we're going to have our title property, and title is going to be specific to that page. So this means that we're going to need a different approach to deal with the head section. We'll cover this in a little bit. Now, after head, we're going to have a page header. The page header is pretty much going to be the same on every single page, the same as the footer. So these things are going to live within a master layout. Now, all of our page content, which you can see here, is going to be in a document type. So in Umbraco, when you're modeling pages, you create document types. So for example, we're going to create a homepage document type. Now, if you've done any kind of work with ASP.NET, then you're going to be very, very familiar with the concept of the beautiful layout. So let's have a look at our layout. Now, we're going to get to the homepage document type very shortly. However, in every single page layout you want to create, you can define and reference a master layout. So as you can see, you just do at quotes layout equals pointing to a CS HTML file. Now this process is exactly the same in .NET Core, nothing new here, nothing to be alarmed about. So squidgy that over. So as you can see within my view folder, I have a master CS HTML file, nothing special about this. Now as we open this, you can see a few interesting things, and the main one for people who've been using Umbraco for a while is going to be this await component.invoke async. Now if you're using the ASP.NET, you're going to be very used to the page partial, and good old page partial was really useful for creating components and composing in loads of functionality. However, in the .NET cores, this has all changed and gone away. See ya! Instead, we're doing view components nowadays. And the way that we access view components is using this await component.invoke async, and then you pass in the name of the component you want to call. So in this example, I've got 3 components: metadata, header, and the footer. So let's have a quick look at these components. So in my code base, I have a specific class library where I add all my custom code. And as you can see within here, I've got a folder called view components. And in here, I've created a MVC. I could have called this layouts. And in here, I've got my footer, my header, and my metadata. So I'll start with the header one quickly, just so you can have a quick shifty at the code. So to make a view component, we inherit from view component. You need to implement this invoke async method, and then you simply do some codings, and then you return a view. So very similar to how we do a partial. And then to render our view, within our views folder, we have views, and then we have component. And in here, you can create a corresponding folder. So let's say I've got my header, and we've got this default CSHTML, and that is the convention to call it default, not index. And then in here, you can see that I'm passing in a model, and then I'm just writing in a load of HTML. So we'll get to the HTML in a bit. However, this is one of the fundamental changes, is that when you're using the new Umbraco view components. Now, another thing I want to mention before we move on is notice this. There's nothing there. I do not use an inherit or a model for my layout file. And this is very different to a lot of solutions out there. So this is the starter kit, and this is the most popular starter kit used by Umbraco. And as you can see, this is their master CSHTML. Unfortunately, I'm in the V8 branch. Let's move to a V9 branch. Oh, that's a bit of a pain. Sample site, web, there we go, views, oh boo. Let's go to a different branch, there we go, V9, www, oh, there we go, views, master. Apologies. So as you can see, in the master template, the Umbraco team tend to use this inherits. So as you can see that we've got this Umbraco view page. So anyone who's new to V9, the difference between V8 and V9 is we now have Umbraco view page. However, I do not recommend that you use this pattern of inherits. The reason why people like to use this inherits and then type a page is that, as you can see right here, in order to get around the issue of having a head section which is duplicated in every view, however, you still need access to the individual page name, as you can see here, model.name. People use this inherits because this will give them access to the page name within your layout without having to do anything else. Now, I'm a big fan of the Gang of Four, and I think we should be using composition over inheritance. So I think it's much better to be able to compose in our head section and our header and our view, Because one, in the future, say you want to change your header, it's much easier to just simply create a new component, switch those around, rather than having to come into this view, start deleting loads of HTML. If you do that, it's high chances that you're going to have to completely regression test everything. And from my experience, composing everything in is much easier. So going back to my example, this is the reason why, whoa, super zoom. This is the reason why I don't have an inherits thing there, and I'm using these await components. That's the reason why the starter kit does not do that. Now, this raises the question, how do I actually get access to the current page's name if I'm not going to pass in that view model? Don't you worry, I've got you covered. So this is going to bring us into some interesting stuffs. So let's have a look at my view metadata component. So it's got all the basics here. Inherit from view component. Then we're going to access this invoke async method. And one of the things you're going to notice is that I'm using this Umbraco context accessor. So if you're using V8, this interface is new. In V8 you did things slightly different. Now, if you're completely new to Umbraco, basically when you want to interact with the CMS, you're going to have to use the Umbraco context. And using the Umbraco context, you can get access to all the different pages in the CMS, all the different components, the settings, all of that beautiful stuff. And this is how you get access. So you use the Umbraco context accessor, and then from here you can use something like a get required Umbraco context. And this is an extension method, which is why I've got this Umbraco extensions using here. And then from here, I'm doing something a bit unique. So as you can see, I'm doing this published request dot published content. So this is actually going to give me access to the current page. So regardless on what page I am, I'm going to get access to the current page. And from here, I'm going to get access to the common metadata that I care about. So in my example, I'm going to get access to the page name. So this is exactly the same way as the starter kit. So we're getting exactly the same property here. However, as you can see, the benefit of my solution is that our master layout is a lot simpler and cleaner. And let's say we want to completely change our metadata or our header. All we need to do is change this simple one line, and it's going to be much easier. Say if you want to do some A/B testing, you can do some beautiful stuff that way. And I find that, having all your HTML like this, creating a really big bloated layout just isn't ideal. The next section on our page that we need to model is the menu. So as you see at the top of our page, we've got introduction drop down. Now this drop down is a mega nav, so it's got a little bit of complexity in it. So how do we model this inside of the CMS? Now the way that I like to model my menus, regardless if they're simple or complex, is I like to create a menu container document type, and this lives outside of the home page. And then underneath the menu container, I have a menu document type. And the reason why I have this one is so that I can have a header, a footer, and this basically is a great user experience, I think. So you can say to your content editors, no matter which menu you need to update, you can basically come to this little area within the CMS and you can update everything. Now, a common pattern that other people like to use when creating a menu is that they'll put something like an is visible property on every single child page of the home page, and then they'll use a bit of a code to then iterate through all of those children and decide which menu item to display. Now, I don't like this because I think it's a really bad content editor experience. In order for a content editor to come in here and start messing around and updating the menu, they're going to have to click on, say, 12, 20, 15 different pages. They're going to have to reorder things. They're going to have to do multiple page savers. Now, by creating this separate area, it's very easy for someone to come in and start managing things. So you can move things up and down, you can rename things, you can add in these extra properties, all really simply. So let's have a look at how we can actually model all of this stuff inside of an Umbraco. So we go to this settings tab, and then within settings we have this document type area. This is where you're going to be creating all of your components. So I've created a folder just to organize my stuff. So you can see that we've got menu, menu container, and menu item. So none of these actually has properties except for the menu item. And as you can see, we've got the multi URL picker property. So adding a property, super simple. If you've never done it before, click on add property, select on select editor. You're going to have a list of say 20 or 30 different properties, things like text area, label, numeric that you can pick from. So this is how you start doing the actual content modeling within Umbraco itself. Now, one thing that I'd like to point out quickly is this permissions. So whenever you're creating document types, it's very good for the content editor to basically restrict what they can do. So instead of allowing a content editor to create any single document type anywhere they want, it's much easier to set this allowed child nodes content type property. So as you can see from here, a menu is only allowed the menu container to be created underneath it, and a menu container only allows the menu item. So going back into our page, if I try to create a new one, you can see that I can only create a menu container. I can't create a home page or a settings page or anything like that. It's very restricted, and this way a content editor can't do anything silly. So I'm really restricting what they can do. So this is a really useful content modeling tip I recommend that you adhere to. So you now know how we're going to structure our menu inside of the CMS. Let's have a look at how we can do that in the code. So in our code, we're going to go back to our header view component. So remember, from our master layout, we're pulling in our header like this, and our menu lives inside of header. So again, we're in a view component. Now, one of the interesting things we need to talk about now is this little jobby. So this menu service. So I've created myself a little utility function, and this is going to go and get all the menu data for us. This is using dependency injection. And the way that dependency injection works in V9 is slightly different. So in Umbraco, we have these things called composers and components. And components and composers are the way that we can bootstrap the CMS and tell the application to do different things. So say you want to set up a scheduled task, or you want to do dependency injection or configure some routing. Now, I think I mentioned in my previous video, you can start thinking about components and composers in the startup file. So we have this add Umbraco bit here where we're doing add composers. I'm not going to cover this in too much detail in this video. However, this is how all your components are loaded. So I'll do dependency injection in detail later. However, the way it works is slightly different. So we create a composer using our iComposer. This is going to give you access to the Umbraco builder. Within Umbraco builder, we can do Umbraco services, add transients. We can put in our interface and our concrete type. And this is how we're going to be able to do our beautiful dependency injection and follow all of our solid principles. So let's have a quick look at menu service. So menu service is this custom class that I've created. Now, one thing you should note is we're passing in the Umbraco context accessor. So we access all of our Umbraco content using Umbraco context. So this is really important. So I'm using the get at root. So this is going to get us our root node. So when I say root node, I'm talking about this thing here. So it's the thing which lives above my home page. My arrow diagramming skills are failing. So if I did a get typed content, this is going to return me these three document types. So home, menu, settings. And this is the reason why I'm filtering out that list by my menu container. And then this is basically going to get me access to all of my menu items. Fairly simple. Now, within my header view component, I'm creating a custom view model, passing that down into a view. So remember, this is in the views components folder. In here, I've got header default HTML. And then from here, I'm passing in my view model. And then I'm simply iterating through it, rendering out some links, some link items, some URL. Again, I won't go into this code, but you get the gist. Next up is our home page. So let's have a look at what we need to model. So we've got this title, we've got a bunch of components, and then we need to pull in a number of blog stories. Let's see how we can do this. Now let's quickly talk about the different properties that I'm using. So I'm going to use a text string to model this container. I'm going to use a block list editor to model all the components. So basically a block list editor is basically going to be a way for content editors to drop components into the page. Now let's have a look at this in action so you can get a feel of what I mean. So this is my component area that I've created. It is of type block list editor. And as you can see, I can add in all these different components. So I've created these myself. So I've got contact us form, feature, banner, card, container. So I can create new components. I can move them around, I can add them, I can delete them. Now for my card container, you can see that I've also got an additional component area inside it. And in here I've got a card item 1. And this has got, okay, so what is this? And this is going to directly map to this bit of content here. So this is called the card container component. And it's made up of a number of sub components called card items. So we've got 3 card items. Now in Umbraco, we completely model this within the CMS. So we go back to settings. And then let's have a look at our home page. So as you can see, it's got this component area. Ooh, there we go. Component area has the block list editor. The block list editor has then been restricted to these blocks. So contact us, feature, and all I need to do to simply add a new block is click on add, and then I can pick from blocks within CMS. Now you might be wondering, John, how do I create a component? That is a great question. So let's think about it. So in Umbraco, everything you create is a document type, and that's the reason why it all lives under this document type folder. However, in order to make something a component, it needs to be an element type. So let's go into our components. So we've got our card item here. And if we click on the permissions, you can see that if I scroll down, I've got this is an element type. So basically ticking this will mean it's a component. And then when I'm using the block list editor, it's going to magically appear in this list. So the content modeling is pretty much exactly the same for a page or a component. The only thing that you really need to massively worry about is this thing here, ticking it. So as you can see, I've got all my components and document types defined here. So I've got a banner, card container, card item, contact us form. And this completely marries up with, this component. We've got a banner component, and we've got the contact us form component down the bottom. Now, one thing that I'll talk about now quickly is that in Umbraco, you can also use the models builder. So models builder is a way for you to basically create C# classes based on the document types created within the CMS. So we do all our content modeling in the CMS. However, to write really nice, nifty code, we want to actually work with hard, strongly typed properties and classes. So instead of having to do this ourselves, we have the Umbraco models builder. Now I might cover this in another video. Basically you just do this generate models, and then clicking on that button within our code bases creates us this. So as you can see here, we've got loads of these blog.generated CSS, blog listing. So we've got the banner, we've got file, home. So everything that I've modeled inside the CMS, I've now got access to as a property inside of my code base. Now, another thing which I think is worth pointing out quickly is that if I go to my home controller, you can see that the way that I've structured my code is kind of different from V9 to V8. So in V9, we're still using the classic render controller. However, nowadays, you're going to have to import a few more stuff in your constructors. Now, another thing which is interesting in V9 compared to V8 is that when we're using the models generated by Model Builder, you can see that we've got a second parameter, and that's called published value fallback. And the way that you access published value fallback, or one way at least, the easiest way, is simply pass it in via the constructor. So we pass this interface in, pass it directly into our model. Job is a good one. And let's have a look at some interesting things. So I won't cover view models in this video. I use a fairly unique way of doing view models, which I think leads to easier to test code and less to couple code. So as you can see here, I've got this composed page view model. I'll show you the code quickly in case you care. So I've got a view model, composed view. So I've created a specific view model kind of base class, which takes in an Umbraco page and a view model. And this works on a page level. So you can see where it says where tpage equals the published content model. Now, if you're working with components and you want to do something similar, you'll also need to create a corresponding block one. And the type for this needs to be of published element model. So something to be aware of, that there is some differences when you're using pages and components with the model builder with an Umbraco. Looking at the view quickly, there's probably nothing too scary there for you, so you don't need to worry too much. I've got a home view. Now in here, I'm passing in my view model, defining my layout. Now, one thing which is worth noting is that when we're using components, or when we're using that block list editor that we created, you need to use this HTML helper called get block list HTML. And basically when you do this, it's going to call all the different subcomponents. Now, one thing that I find interesting is that out of the box, the block list editor will only call a view directory, view directly, passing in the data. Now, I'm a big fan of following MVC properly. So I like to use controllers, view models, and views. Now, the problem is that out of the box, the block list, the way it works is it's just going to pass in data and it's going to be within your view. So say you need to do extra information, you need to call an API, whatever it is you need to do, you're going to have to do all of that code within your view. So this is why I prefer to change the default behavior quickly, and I like to call a controller from my block list. And this is all possible. So within our block list here, so within our partial, well, let's start from the beginning, within views, within partials, within a block list, you will find this default CSHTML comes out the box with an Umbraco. Now, in order to get Umbraco to call a controller rather than the view directly, you're going to have to change line 11. And as you can see here, I've changed it to do a component invoke async, and then we're passing in the alias type and the data. So doing this means that when we do that call in our HTML, this get block list HTML, the code is going to automatically look for some view components for us. So this is the reason, if you look in my view components folder, I've got all this banner view component, card component, card item. And as long as it's got the view component and it uses the document type alias, and notice here, this is important, that I'm using the alias, and that's the reason why I'm using lowercase c rather than the capital case. So all of my code here, as you can see, is using lowercase conventions. But doing this and doing that slight tweak means that when your code is running, it's going to start calling these view component controllers for you. So I 100% recommend that you do this. Now, the code in all of these view components is fairly simple. The banner just uses a text property. So again, we're just using the model generated by the model builder, passing it into a view. The container does the same. Remember that we need to pass in this iPublished value fallback to pass in as this second parameter here. Card item does exactly the same. Contact us form, exactly the same. You get the gist by now. So that is basically how we're going to call our property and make sure that it calls a correct controller. Now, the next thing that we want to look at on our page is that we have this blogging area. So on our homepage, we're pulling in a load of different blogs. Now in the CMS, what I've done is I've created two new document types. So we've got blog listing. This is empty for this example because I haven't created it. And we've also got our blog page. So our blog page is made up of all these different properties. Looking in the CMS, you get the gist. So homepage, blog listing, all of our blogs live underneath it. So I don't want to say it's aliens, but it's aliens. This completely maps to this property here. So I don't think this code's too scary, fairly simple and intuitive. However, let's go back to our home page controller. So as you can see, we've got this blog service that I've created. So again, this is a custom service. This is going to pull in the data. And remember, whenever we're using a custom service, we need to register it with our dependency injection for it to work. Now, blog service, again, is using the Umbraco iContext accessor. We need to access the Umbraco context to get all that information. You're probably going to get the gist of this because it's the same as the other code is get at root, filter everything to our blog listing, get our blog pages, return it back to the page. Simple. This means that we've now got our simple way of rendering all this information out, and we've got all of that data on the page. The last thing that we need to model is the footer, and there's one little surprise left, and this is settings management. So when we're talking about global settings, where in the CMS should you add them? Now, out of the box, Umbraco doesn't really have any default settings management, so it is up to you to decide how you want to manage it. Now, personally, I recommend that you always create a separate settings page. So let's have a quick peeky in the CMS to see how I've modeled mine. So as you can see here, I've got a settings page. Now, for this settings page in particular, I've just created a component area. This is again of block list editor type, and as you can see, I've dropped in this contact us form component. And this is the way that I really recommend that you manage settings. So one approach that a lot of people take is that on the homepage item itself, someone will create a settings tab, and then within this settings tab, everyone will put all the document properties. Now, I personally hate this pattern because I think it leads to bloat and maintenance woes. So imagine it, in 5 years, you keep adding properties. As the presentation changes, you change your header, you change your footer, things come and go. It's very difficult to actually manage which settings need to stay on the homepage, which become obsolete. So adding everything on the homepage just bloats it, just means that the API takes longer to load. There's just cruft on it. Also, just think, if you accidentally expose your homepage somehow within your search settings, it's going to be indexed. We don't want any of this stuff, so use a settings page if you want to be a content modeling master. Now, let's have a quick look at the settings page in the CMS. There's nothing too exciting in here. It's a normal document type. It's of block list editor, which has been restricted just to allow our contact us form component. The code for this again is fairly simple. If we have a look at our footer view component, you can see that I'm injecting this iSettings service. Because I'm creating a separate dependency, you know it by now, we need to register it with the dependency injection. And our settings service, I've used a slightly different API this time. So this one is using the Umbraco context factory, which is more available in V8. So as you can see, the code I've used to access the Umbraco context is slightly different from the other ones. I prefer the other one, however, I thought I'd add this in there just so you can see there's multiple ways of doing the same thing. So we're doing ensure Umbraco context, then basically filtering out the settings page from the root, passing it back to our component, creating a view model, passing it down. That concludes all of the steps that you need to follow to successfully do some content modeling with your first page in Umbraco. Now, I've never done this type of complete walkthrough before. Really interested to know, did you like it? Was it too much? Was it too overwhelming? If you actually found value in it, please let me know because I can do some more videos like this. However, if no one says anything, this is the longest video I'll probably ever do. So what I'm going to do for the rest of the series is start drilling down into more detail into some of these things, like how dependency injection works, all the different options, components, all that sort of beautiful stuff, because there's some interesting stuff there. So if you want to learn more about Umbraco and you want to see the rest of these videos, smash the subscribe button if you haven't already. If you found value from my videos, please do me a favor, hit like, because it helps more people see my videos and I'd appreciate it. Now, one bit of news is I'm going to start my Umbraco V9 book soon. Now it's going to be like $4.99, and while it's in beta and I'm writing it, you can buy it, you'll get access to it. It probably won't make any sense. However, it really does help me keep motivated writing these books. Writing a book is hard, takes ages, and just chipping in a fiver here and there just keeps me the motivation to finish it off. And that's how basically the last 2 books got written, basically from everyone's support. So thanks very much for that. Link will be coming soon. Also, if you want to keep up to date with the industry news, I do a weekly newsletter, link below, goes out every Sunday, got loads of cool links in it. Recommend you do that. Otherwise, I hope you found some value. Hope you've had a great time watching this video and you're having a great day wherever you are in the world. And happy coding.